We're watching Liquid Lunch. I usually say it's a terrific Tuesday, but we're still in the Corona bunker, locked up in our houses. I'm in my living room studio, and we have a guest right now who's, for a while now, not been going through a terrific time. And independent journalist Andy Ngo joins us now, along with Frank Morano. Andy, how are you? Thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
So, for those of you at home who aren't familiar with Andy's story, he was on with us a few months back on Liquid Lunch, and he was attacked physically, literally beat the hell out of him, hit him with bottles full of concrete, and really busted him up badly. And I guess, Andy, we had John Banzaf on last week. He's a public interest attorney, and he said one remedy is to sue these people. And now it seems like you found a path to justice here.
Well, that's the plan. It's unfortunate that we have to go through the civil route because myself, my counsel, Harmeet Dillon, and others have poured in hundreds of hours to try to identify those who were involved in my assaults, and we don't have the tools of law enforcement, so we were essentially working as best we could in the 11 months since the beating. And we had hoped during that time that there would be some arrests, that I would get some justice, but it hasn't happened, probably won't happen. So lawsuit has to move forward, and I'm very lucky to be a client of the Center for American Liberty. There aren't very many civil rights organizations who take on causes like mine, whereas on the left you see how literally tens of millions of dollars have been raised to bail out not just protesters, but violent protesters and looters and rioters as well.
Andy, you reported on your Twitter feed, and you're doing really interesting stuff on Twitter. And if people are interested in your perspective and your reporting on what's going on, they could find you at Mr. Andy NGO. You reported on your Twitter feed that the mayor there is allowing a dangerous situation where Antifa militants have actually taken over and created an autonomous zone in the city with their own rules. A police precinct, I never thought I'd see this in America. A police precinct has been totally abandoned, and Antifa has set up barricades to create a border, and they're calling for volunteers to provide armed guards. There are going to be those that are skeptical out there. How do we know for a fact that this is Antifa that's behind this?
So the tweet that you're referring to is what's happening right now in Seattle, actually. So those who are trying, I think the brilliance of Antifa has been their ability to fool the public into believing they don't actually exist in any type of organized fashion. So what's happened in Seattle right now is in the area around the East Police Precinct, an area essentially in the middle of a major American city in the Pacific Northwest. A 6-block zone has been occupied by thugs, essentially, far left extremists. There is Antifa there are anarchists, there are communists, they're all coming together. They literally have set up barricades and moved city property in the middle of the roads to block off cars. They have people who are providing on security, and they're calling for people to come armed. They're calling this an insurrection, and so these type of occupations have been repeated for a long time elsewhere. You can look back to Occupy a decade ago, and after that, more recently in Portland in 2018, there was a 5-week occupation outside the ICE facility. And the Antifa elements in there, in that you see the ideology of the agitprop that's disseminated in the literature they have there, as well as the symbols. So if you ask them, are we Antifa? If you're there, they'll say yes. But I mean, Antifa can be a number of groups. And so you look at the tactics, you look at the ideology, and you look at the literature, and you look at the accounts boosting the occupation, then that's how I feel very confident saying this is Antifa. Not just confident; it's clearly in front of us. Um, yeah, so you just follow the network and influence of those who are agitating for this insurrection in Seattle, and you see that it goes right back to the far left anarchist communist ideology.
That's right. Hey, Andy, we covered it heavily, and I'm glad to see you look 1,000 times better. God bless you.
Thank you.
But we highlighted some Project Veritas stuff last week where they got inside an Antifa in Rose City, and they were talking about, how to exert, maximum pain, talking about go after people's eyeballs, go for eye gouging. If you hit someone with a good right, don't be all proud of yourself. Make sure you destroy your enemy, hit them when they're down, punch them, knock them out. For those people who don't know, just list out, because people think, these people crying about nothing. What were your injuries?
I was diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury, subarachnoid hemorrhoid, hemorrhage. um, and that causes is a brain bleed, and it's been 11 months since that happened. I'm still dealing with the injuries from that. I think because the attack was so short, only part of it was caught on video. But even if the whole thing was caught on video, it lasted, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds or something. People kind of underestimate the level of injuries that can be inflicted on a human in that amount of time. Not just from one person, but there were, I think, like 12 people beating me. And as I look back on the video that was recorded, frame by frame, I see some of them may have had brass knuckles underneath their gloves. It certainly has some type of hardened material. I remember when I was hit, it didn't register with me that they were punches because they were so hard that they physically knocked me forward and back. But
It broke you. I thought there was facial or orbital issues. They smashed your face. And I thought there was even at that time, some thought that there were some bottles filled with rocks or concrete or something. Was that the case?
So after I was beaten, as I was trying to get away, that was when a whole mob of them then began throwing all these liquids on me. To this day, I still don't know what it is. Portland police at that time have put out a tweet that some of the liquids that were thrown on people may have been contaminated with quick drying cement. But unfortunately, Portland police never obtained a sample to confirm that. And so we still don't know to this day, although what the NYPD sources had told the New York Post in a report that was out yesterday is that some concrete was filled into ice cream carton containers so that it looked, just like food, but it was in fact filled with hard concrete that was left at some of these protest sites where the riots had happened. So don't underestimate the ability and desire of these extremists to come up with, I don't know if I'll call them creative, but very brutal ways to hurt, maim, and potentially kill people with rudimentary homemade weapons.
Well, Andy, you mentioned the no-go zones that Antifa is setting up in Seattle. Portland, where you were attacked, they actually had a similar no-go zone there a couple of years ago, didn't they?
Yeah, I just talked about, yes. So in 2018, when there were all these protests because of what had happened with the crisis at the southern border, the flashpoints across America have been the ICE facilities and law enforcement on the border. And so in Portland, they had actually overtaken the facility for a week. The facility had to shut down because it was a huge security risk for staff and people inside. And then after DHS federal police had to come in to clear out the rioters because the mayor wouldn't let Portland police do their job, all the rioters and protesters just moved to the adjacent area. public property and just built this encampment that became their no-go zone. And by no-go zone, I mean no police were allowed, no journalists were allowed
Wow.
in there. You had to follow their rules. So at that time, I wasn't really well known yet. So I did actually get to go and walk in and see what a so-called utopia actually looks like. It's
Wow.
just pure anarchy, drug abuse. It was essentially a large dumping site that became a biohazard, and
Got
that's
it.
why it got shut down.
Got it. Andy, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Keep us posted on any developments, and we'll check back with you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be back right after this. A little more liquid lunch for you in just a minute.